Hello and welcome to the bi-weekly meeting podcast for the OWASP Top 10 for Large Language Model Applications. If you'd like to stay up to date with our project, please click subscribe. And if you enjoy the content or have any questions, please feel free to comment and share. Now, on to our meeting.
Yeah, we have 20 people on. That's great. Thank you, everyone, for joining. So let's go ahead and dive in. So everyone, welcome to the June 20th meeting of the OWASP Top 10 for Large Language Models expert group. It's a really active time in the project, so I'm really pleased to have everybody joining today. So really briefly, a lot of activity around the core v2 list. I know Ads is here, but I think he said he was doing two things at once, so might not be on audio and video. So I'll just go through the roadmap really quickly, remind everyone where we are. The project actually kicked off well before April. We did a couple of months of different brainstorming activities, which I think surfaced a lot of good ideas. We did a lot of reviews of the existing entries, and you see that in the first couple entries of the V2 roadmap here through April and May. And then really what we did is we had a month where we allowed people to take some time and construct new candidate entries for the list, followed by some voting. And I'm going to go through some details on what we got for new entries and where we are with voting. But I think it's worth talking through the rest of the roadmap briefly so everyone just understands the context of how we're going to try and run this up through October. So the phase that we're in now is voting for the new entries. We're going to try and close that down by June 30th, which I will cover out. Then we are going to take some time to do some voting and collation, and I expect this to take a little bit of time. I'm hoping we have a lot of voting data. And then we're really going to work on probably some of these will show that there isn't a lot of interest in them and we'll wind up discarding them. Some of them will wind up getting merged into other entries. And so I'm calling this the merging and down selection phase. Then where we're really going to get into is a phase that we didn't have in 1.0 is really looking forward to using some of the work Emmanuel and others have been doing around bringing us a set of data that we can use outside of just expert opinion on how are we going to rank these threats. Then we'll get into really cleanup, layout, and publication with a goal of having this published on October 1st. So I want to thank everybody for submitting vulnerabilities. We had 34 new vulnerabilities submitted. That's above and beyond the top 10, which many of the leads have continued to work on in the intervening months. So that means right now we have 44 candidates for the upcoming top 10 list, which is amazing. I think that's probably about as many entries as we can practically handle. So really what this leads us to is the voting. And voting was a really critical part of what we did in the 1.0 list. I think it helped keep this so that no single voice, no matter how loud they were, could really dominate the discussion. There was always a broad-based review by the team, even from people who didn't have time to commit to things like writing new reviews or new vulnerabilities, or who don't spend 24 hours a day hanging out on Slack. So we have our 34 candidates. Ads and Tetsuo created both web and PDF indices of these, so they're easy to browse. They're now cleanly named and organized, which is fantastic. When I started building the survey for this, I originally went down a path that was going to have at least 68 questions in the questionnaire, a couple of ones for each entry. I realized that was mostly going to keep people away, and it was going to be pretty onerous. So I'm trying something new here, which is an abbreviated version. I think it's working pretty well so far, which is everyone gets to pick their top 5 and bottom 1 candidate. And so the idea is if you pick your top 5 and we have a lot of people vote, we'll be able to kind of summarize that into scores and we'll see who's getting the most votes. And then one down vote is why not bottom 5? Because 2 things. One, I think it's more important to find the ones that we love, not the ones that we hate. The other thing is, again, I was trying to keep the total number of questions under control. So there will be plenty more chances to winnow things down, but if we get a lot of votes for some of these, on the negative side, that will send some pretty strong signals. Thanks for the question, Heather. Just this morning, I put up LinkedIn and Twitter posts. Those are in the main channel. I would appreciate it if people would pick those up and repost them, retweet them. I have gotten a number of reposts on those already, and we're seeing some good traffic. This has been up for a very short time, and it is going to take people quite a bit of time, I hope, to read through all of those entries and think about them. So already having 14 votes in is fantastic. The goal would be to close voting at the end of this month, but I'm really thinking we need to get at least 100 votes in for this to seem statistically significant. So in the event that we don't have enough votes on 6:30, I am keeping our options open to extend the voting. But I think if we really do promote these posts and people encourage colleagues who are knowledgeable in the area to go ahead and vote, I expect we'll exceed that 100 substantially. Are we going to increase the top number? Oh, you mean top 10? I often get asked this. Absolutely not.
Absolutely, yes. Sorry.
But I will say, do we have options for honorable mentions and things like that? Maybe. That'll be a hot topic of discussion as we get there. But the brand is OWASP top 10 list. Not willing to flex on that. It's too important to the adoption of this thing that be a recognizable thing. And there's plenty of history that says 10 is a magic number for these things. So there you go.
Yeah, Steve, I know there's been a number of people who feel, oops, there's my video, that, we get a lot of questions on this. And I think, Krishna, just through our discussions, your concern is that people think that there's only 10. And I'm with Steve. I mean, top 10 has been the brand, but I think this is where we jump in and use those creative thinking hats and figure out a way so that we address the issue that you're concerned about, Krishna. And yeah, so yeah, I'm definitely sensitive to it, and I'm willing to come up with ideas. I'm a great idea person. I have lots of ideas.
Yeah, and I think, as Steve was mentioning, honorable mentions might be a way to think about it, so that there's some list. They're not we have a focus around the top 10.
Oh, sorry. Polite people have their hands up, Steve.
Ads.
I'm sorry, I have about 20 seconds. We should be promoting the OWASP ASVS as per the traditional API security list, in my opinion. I'm with Steve. We do not change the top 10 because that's the intention of the project, and I really won't want to lose that.
Okay.
And I would,
John?
I would add to that, my views. Don't break something that works. We recommend it everywhere. The fact that we focus people's minds in 10 is phenomenal. It doesn't mean we have to restrict ourselves. Sandy and the checklist is a prime example that we can actually repeat success on different formats. So we talked about layers. We need to add layers, and I think connecting with the other pieces of security, OWASP ASVS and LLM ASVS, yeah, I guess my vote too.
Russell.
Yeah, hey, I do owe Sandy a follow-up from last week. I think the other way to restrict this is make sure we've got the right audience in the context. You know, we don't want people who are deployers still looking at the top 10. It's about developers, right? Who is the audience? You are here. What's the circle you're in? And we can point people to this risk management framework or whatever else it is that they think are important, but aren't part of our top 10 list.
Yeah. So, look, I think the thing that I will say here is the top 10 list is the top 10 list, but we have had success doing two things. One is working with other groups that have different charters. And so working with people like MITRE Atlas and things like that, who are maybe building more what I would call rigorous standards rather than educational material. I think that's great. Also, I think Sandy has proved with the checklist and now some of the other things that are in the pipe, we are going to create a set of materials around the project, around the core of the top 10 list, which is just really supposed to be broadly accessible. So I think there's work we can do as a group that isn't changing the nature of the top 10 list, where we can work on doing more broad-based explorations of these things. And we'll see if we have time to talk about it today, but things like the red teaming project, that's another example of something where we can really stretch our legs without changing the nature of the core top 10. Just a quick note, the RSA presentation that Gavin and I did last month went up on YouTube last week. So I think it's actually a pretty good introduction to the top 10, even though we don't go through all of them. It'll give people an idea. So if there are folks, say, inside your organizations that you want to share this to, I think it's a pretty accessible way for people to get an introduction. So just wanted to let everybody know it's there. All right, and with that, several of the leads did drop in slides. So we're going to go through that, and then we'll open it up for a broader discussion. So I think this is Scott.
Yeah, this is just a reminder for folks that we do have this outreach roadmap. The whole idea of this is to really make sure we're capturing things that we're wanting to do or things that we are doing, both as kind of individuals, so that we can communicate this out to the broader community so they can join us at these events and activities and be part of the learning more about the OWASP Top 10. So there's a link down below. Please, for folks, if you have activities that you're going to be at, mentioning or talking about the top 10, please go to that link, find a category, rough time frame, drop it in, and we'll use that to both promote and also to look at engaging. If there's an idea, such as there may be a call for papers that's available for a particular talk, let's add that in there, and we can add that as a potential area to focus. So that's just a quick reminder. We've been doing this last few weeks, so I want to make sure that folks are aware.
Yeah, I have updated a couple of things on the outreach roadmap. I think this is a good one.
Awesome.
Cool. Thank you very much. So I want to talk a little bit about some new capabilities that we've come up with here, working with the OWASP team. We now have the ability to and our website. We now have the ability to self-host webinars. So as we start to look at some of the areas we want to educate folks on, we now have in place, we use OnZoom. And so we will use OnZoom for creating our webinars. We simply need to know time, date, and then we can topic, of course, and then we can schedule those. We have, as part of our WordPress implementation, we have Fluent CRM, so we can send out emails, we can do automation so that we can do attendee registration. So all the stuff we need to do those types of things, we now have. Once we have them completed, they'll be hosted as resources on our website. And also, as we're rolling in with new paid sponsorships that are coming in, this will give opportunities for our paid sponsors also to be able to promote and co-sponsor webinars. So right now, the action item is to submit webinar ideas on the outreach roadmap spreadsheet. There's a webinar track. So I'll be looking for folks, if you have ideas or interests around those, go ahead and get those identified. The process is, once we have those identified, we'll work with the OWASP team to make sure that we have a date available and scheduled, because the resources are used across all projects. But once we have that scheduled, we'll be able to set up the website and registration details. We're also starting to track community growth statistics. I just threw this up here just so people were aware. We started to look at what our share of voice was. Share of voice is a measure of, in this case, right now, we're just counting the articles and videos that were created that were specifically talking about LLM-related security. We made up a good portion of those in 2023. There were a lot fewer of them in 2023 than there are now. So 2024 is almost 2 to 3 times the amount of articles. So, but we're continuing to keep a good voice and position there. We're also starting to collate to understand how our community is growing and to make sure we're doing the right kind of things to help support it. Statistics around our both our community outreach as well as engagement. So we just started this tracking, so we're trying to pull together some of the historical data on some of these stats, but this is helping us to continue to kind of see how and what we can do to help make the project successful and grow. We do have one issue that's come up. In terms of tracking, we identified that GitHub has no way to measure download. If anybody has a creative idea, I'm open to creative ideas. So if you download a PDF from GitHub, right now there's no statistical way to measure it. If anybody has a script, let me know. Otherwise, we'll recommend replacing those with links to assets that can be trackable links, so we can track how many people are downloading, utilizing the resources, and we can get an idea of how much value we're creating for the community. Just continue to talk about stats. So now we have the website. We're now capturing statistics around both where everybody is coming to from the website. We've just now put in the process of putting Google Analytics set up on the back end, so we can have a broader set of visibility, and extending Google Analytics to not just the website, but also extending it to the wiki page, and then extending it to the OWASP project page. Because right now there aren't any statistics on who's visiting and how we're doing there. So those will be added as well. And we'll also have tracking and on the top 10 pages or areas that are being accessed. So we'll make this available as we go ahead.
Very cool.
So as a heads up, upcoming calls for papers for folks. So we have the ones that we have tracking right now. If you have other ones, again, please do put them in the outreach. We have 3 right now that are coming up in the near term that I'm aware of. One is B-Sides New York City. So that closes on the 19th of July. The closest one we have is September AI, and that's which was Candace has talked about in the previous session. That's coming up on the 28th of September. And then we also have the AppSec, the OWASP AppSec US conference, which is closing on the 15th of July. So if you have topics, get them in.
The newsletter, yep. Go ahead. The newsletter is published, the June edition. June edition is focusing on V2 voting, right? It's better to keep the newsletter as one focus. Otherwise, what happens is if you have 10 things in there, people don't remember any of them. I also have a LinkedIn post, so please support that one as well. So that way we have more more mind share, whatever it is, from our various social media things. July edition, I think, so I have updated Scott's outreach spreadsheet. So this is good, Scott, because now we can put in, July edition, probably we'll do the teaming RSA session. So what we'll do is take all the RSA sessions. I will, watch them and then take points, etc., as well as guide them to the links for people who want to do more things, right? Because if you just put the links in, probably nobody would click on it, right? But if you put some summary on it, that will at least get them interested. October edition, of course, will be the V2, right? Because we will have the V2 done, and then October will be the V2. So then we have August and September. So I was thinking probably August and September, we might have some V2 momentum. So we can actually create some momentum which says, hey, this is where the V2 discussions are and that kind of stuff. And also time for putting some of the initiatives. So that is a plan from a newsletter perspective. Any thoughts, any comments on the newsletter? Does it look good? So one thing I do is I do send the fatal flaw, right? I usually send out one slightly before, right? Something that is halfway out so that people can take a look at it. And then I also send out the fatal flaw. Please take a look at it because, I will miss, right? Anybody will miss. So I did 2 or 3 eyeballs just looking at it, making sure that everything is correct and et cetera, et cetera. And it looks cohesive, right? Sometimes something stands out. Sometimes the links are, I know, Steve, you a couple of times you were looking at and saying the links were not working, et cetera, et cetera. So please take a look at them.
I think Ads has a question.
Go ahead. Yeah. Go ahead, Sandy.
Ads has a question.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Scott, we can do tracking with releases on GitHub, depending what you're wanting to track asset wise. So let's look up about that because we currently put like PDFs and stuff in the repo, but yeah, that's kind of one thing I was thinking as well.
Yeah, so we can track releases. We have to. Let's take a look at it offline because I was trying to look at because I was trying to look at a solution for that. So yeah, let's work on that offline. That'd be great.
Go on.
So continuing, I have a couple more quick ones. I submitted 2 webinar ideas in the outreach spreadsheet. Both of them, at least on V2 and Red Teaming, right? So once V2 comes in, then we can do what would Red Team look like for V2. 2 audience. One is for the CSOs because we and other is for the more on the developer side. Does that make sense, Sandy? I was talking with Sandy about it. That might be a good way to introduce V2 to those 2 audience as well, right, Sandy?
Yep. No, I agree. No, it's just many thanks to Scott. I mean, he has been such a great person to add to the team because he's just, we are victims of our own success right now because there's just so many requests, so much stuff going on. So, yep, it makes a lot of sense, Krishna.
Thank you. And again, I echo Scott. Thank you. Thank you. I know it's a thankless job, right? But we do need to do so that all of these things look cohesive. And coherent and channeled, right? Otherwise, we will have 5 different things running 10 different ways. So anyway, that's all what we have on the newsletter side. Send any notes on any ideas. Things might not, the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? We do have to add more things to it, etc., etc.
Awesome, Krishna. Thanks for picking this up. I know you've only had this for a couple months, but it's great to see how it's come together and actually seeing that there are hundreds and hundreds of people actually opening this and reading it is really gratifying. So that's awesome. Thank you so much. All right. This is
Sandy. Sorry.
There we go.
Yep. So just, much like the request for the new vulnerabilities, I sent out a questionnaire just asking for feedback. And pretty consistent with what I was already thinking was people just want more of what we do. Use cases, prioritize threats, metrics, mitigations. And so, my strategy is to blend in if there's any new top 10, any of the key learnings we get from that, and also incorporate the red teaming stuff that Krishna and the rest of the team are working on. So very positive feedback, just they want more actionable. That's the key here is people go, I don't want to talk about AGI. Tell me what I have to do today. And so I completely align with that. Any comments or feedback?
Okay.
So is there a specific call to action you have going on right now you want to highlight at all, Sandy?
No, I think it's all, I'm kind of the bottleneck, which is I've had a number of people who said that they'd like to contribute. I need to get back to them and say, what would you like to contribute? And kind of come up with my strategy. So yeah, no call to action at this point.
All right.
Okay, perfect. So Tetsu has, been amazing. Again, Krishna mentioned, some of the work that we're doing. I mean, one of the most amazing things I've experienced being part of this project is just seeing how other people are willing to jump in and contribute. So Tenzing, he came up, what he exposed me to, and I'm a little embarrassed to say that I hadn't even thought about this, was how difficult it is to translate anything that we produce. There's a huge appetite for people to translate it into a different language, but the format that we use today makes it a fairly heavy lift. And so he's come up with a process that if we start starting from templates and subtemplates, then when it comes time, we do that in English. When it comes time to convert it, it's not quite so painful. In fact, he's come up with a process that seems to be pretty simple. There's some nuances. I think he said German, like on images. So the really difficult part in language conversion is the images and the tables. And so what he is suggesting is if we plan that early, then when somebody goes to convert that, it's much easier for them to do. So he has a tool, he calls it the OWASP PDF tool. He has a process that he and his team has created. Each owner of a project gets a key that puts a watermark. Only the owner of the project can remove the watermark. And he points out that this is really helpful to other people too, because there's so many different versions, like what's the current version? We're experiencing things that happen to projects that are super successful, which is we're at a point where we need more rigor around what we're doing so everybody else can use it effectively. They don't need the secret to be at every meeting to understand what's going on. So really the next step, this is kind of bigger than my project. I know ads, you've been heavily involved with that. There was some conversations going back and forth. Ads asked Tenzing if he would be willing to share his code. And there was, some, back and forth. We're reluctant to take on a project that we don't actually own, because we've had that experience in the past where somebody has a key component and then they leave the project, then we don't have access to it, and we're depending on it. So I think the next steps is for me to work with Ads and Scott and Steve and whoever else is passionate about this, about how do we operationalize Tenzing's Tetsu's project. He is willing to take the lead on this, kind of be the lead for translation and PDF. So I think that, I know we've had Jason has worked on that. There's been a number of people who have been really helpful with that. So maybe that's its own project.
Well, so this is one of the things, so Sandy, I'm glad you brought this into the discussion. I think one of the challenges right now is we have 3 PDF pipelines and it's kind of out of control. I'm really looking to Jason to help us wrangle this to the ground. So Jason, I see you're here. You want to comment on how we should think about this?
So we have 2 competing visions for what this should look like right now. And one of them is the one that you just presented, Sandy, from Tetsuo. And then the other one is one that kind of has been in the back of my mind for a while. And everybody agrees about the problem, right? So the problem is we have so many PDF pipelines. It's difficult to convert to different translations. There's kind of a bottleneck on who can create what version of which doc right now. So, some person can create the Japanese translation, a different person has to generate the German translation, and so on. So how do we wrangle all that together? It has been something that's been on the back of my mind for a while now. I worked with Telesh a little bit, and we both looked at Tetsu's process, and it's a cool process. But we had some of the same concerns that you addressed, right? It's a single project, it's already managed by one person. How do we include it so that more people can do things and we're not going through a single bottleneck? And what we're suggesting as a competing vision is that we use LaTeX for templating everything. And then we keep the entries in Markdown, we keep content in Markdown. Images are a different issue. We need to figure out what works there to do image generation. It could be that we have metadata stored someplace else that can be easily translated. It could be that we use something like Uniform or having, there's a couple different options there. Images are always going to be hard. The text gets baked into the image, and then that means you have to have access to the image's source code to be able to edit it. But the advantage of going LaTeX is everything just gets checked into the GitHub repo, and anybody with access to the repo can download it, edit it, run a simple makefile, and generate the PDF. I'm happy to let Tetsuo run with this because I'm gonna, I think, start focusing on some of the other activities that we've got, like red teaming stuff. So I'm happy to maybe share it with him or however we want to do it. But I think LaTeX is really the right direction forward to bring everything into one single cohesive thing that anybody can edit. We've removed the bottlenecks, and it can be applied across all of the documentation.
I was just gonna say, I feel like this is definitely out of my area. So whoever I can help, I just think that, it'd be to our advantage to have a single process, and just let me know who I should point him at or who wants to take the lead on it.
So I think for him, the first step is jump in style, right? The style channel, because that's where some of this conversation has been happening, and that's where it will continue to happen.
Let's push everything towards that style channel, and maybe let's make an announcement about that on the main list. I think we need to get Tetsuo and Telesh both into that discussion, and see if we can wrangle this. I mean, we have some time. I think the big push on publications is going to come up as we get into the fall in the Northern Hemisphere here, and we have 2.0 for the core list and 2.0 for the CISO checklist. We want to figure out how to publish those and get those into the right formats as we get those built. So let's just take that on as a thing that we need to wrestle to the ground.
And the great news is both of these competing visions are already in place. So the LaTeX template and everything is already in place with the governance checklist, and the Tenzing thing is already in place with the translation work that Tetsuo has done. So it's really just, let's look at these two things that are already working and figure out which one scales across all the things.
Great. All right. With that, that's the end of the slides. So I'm going to open it up. Do anybody have topics for today for the group?
Yeah, one thing I forgot to drop a slide in for, so, sorry, I also forgot to raise my hand. So sorry, guys. For AppSec happening next week in Lisbon, we will have a presence. We will have John there. To answer and discuss any questions anybody has. So I just want to highlight that if anybody happens to be attending the Lisbon conference, search out John. And if you want to talk more OWASP, LLM Top 10. We did not have a booth or space this year or talk because they were just simply slammed with sessions, but we will be there at San Francisco and in the future at Lisbon.
And I think, we will be okay actually in Lisbon. We now have, and thanks for the, kind of pointing to the right people, Scott, very kind of nicely, the ASVS team and their sponsor, GIT.io, offered the room for us to do a project update. So I will be representing you there and try and kind of recruit as many people as possible. I think also, we need to pay more attention to Europe. I'd like Scott to help you. I think, when I say slides and when I say that, it's all very kind of quite naturally US-centric, but Europe is a large audience too. We need to kind of expand and beyond. So hopefully Lisbon will be the start of that.
Fantastic.
That's great, John. I'm glad to give you that update. Yeah. And so I think if we can also get Aubrey to kind of help a little bit on a push on social, that might also help. Now that we've got secured a room, I know we've been working kind of last minute to kind of pull this thing together, literally last second.
Me and Scott have been the kind of the guerrilla fighters and the kind of around the conference.
Yeah.
Let me know what you guys need in the PR Slack, and I'm happy to help.
All right. I see Emmanuel is being polite and has his hand up. So Emmanuel, floor is yours.
Morning, everyone. Just a reminder, please help share about our data collection. I think we need to spread the word because this data set will be really important. And that's all from us. Thank you.
Hey, Emmanuel, if you have a link you want people to promote, go ahead and drop it in the chat. We'll at least get the folks here who can see it and probably make it easier for them to grab.
Yeah, will do. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else on today's call want to share something with the team?
I already saw the list of the new candidates. Should we try to prioritize the names that we already have? Or, I mean, the way I see it, I might be mistaken. The way I see it, many of the new candidates could be seen as specific cases or they already top 10 identified. Should we try to prioritize the names that we have? We will, try to update with the new ones. Any guideline about it?
So let me bring this up really quickly. I think it's worth just going over the philosophy on the voting as we've built it here. All right, if you look at the voting here, and some of this is in the instructions, there are these 34 candidates. You can get them either in the web or the PDF version. The idea here is you're going to get to select 5 top entries. And you also have the ability to select one bottom entry that you don't think is appropriate for one reason or another. If you look at the way that the survey is laid out here, you simply get to pick, from the available options. And then you get to give some, what I'm calling color around each one. So for example, should it be a new top level issue? Should it be folded into another vulnerability or concept? Those are things that you can basically add in the free text. And I am going to be using various Gen AI tools to sift through all of the comments on these and try to summarize the feelings of the group, even if we get, hundreds of pieces of feedback here, which I'm hoping we do. Ultimately, though, if you go back to the roadmap, remember where we are is at this point, we're kind of in the middle game of the project, which is actually we're right here, which is voting. Then there's going to be a period of collating the votes. Then we're going to go to what I'm calling the merge down and selection phase. And this goes to your question, Ivan, about do some of these belong inside other entries? Should some of these entries be merged together? Should some of these entries maybe subsume some of the older entries? We have a lot of voting that we did earlier on the existing top 10, so I feel like we have that data in terms of how people feel about them. But ultimately, at some point here, we go into more data analysis, and this is where we start to pull in, hopefully, some of the data from Emmanuel's project, which is going to help us rank these as we get to the final down selection phases, where we'll have a list of candidates, and that list, the length of that list will probably depend on the level of feedback and the level of uniformness that we're seeing from the expert group, but ultimately we'll apply some of that. So I'd say at this point, the idea is simply to get early feedback on that list of 34 so that we can start to compress down, because 34 plus 10, ultimately 44 is a lot to deal with. So this is this early round where we're going to start to winnow that down and then start to assign a set of leads. There are leads for the existing top 10. Some of these will fold in and we'll ask the existing leads to take some of those ideas and pull them in. Other ones may become new top level candidates, and we'll assign leads to work on those through the rest of the project. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Got it. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
All right. Great question. Thanks for asking that. Anyone else, questions or comments for the team? All right, everybody, thank you very much. Great meeting, great participation. As you've seen here from Scott and others, tremendous amount of traction with the project. I go out and I do some kind of public speaking engagement a couple of times a month now, and the room is always full and the feedback is always great. Continue to see adoption and discussion in the press around this. I think some of you may have seen the interview I did for Dark Reading about the Apple Gen AI launch, and just being able to insert these OWASP ideas into those broader discussions around what's what's going on with trillion-dollar companies and be able to have a voice in how they should be thinking about their LLM security is fantastic, and it's a testament to the work you're all doing. So look forward to seeing you all again in a couple of weeks. Again, please do go get in your votes. That is urgent, and please do share the voting with your networks and your coworkers. We'd like to get as much input in there as we can. Having a broad base of involved people in the project is what really differentiates this from some of the narrow things coming from one individual or one company. Thanks, everybody. See you soon.
Yes, bye.
Thanks all.
Thanks for checking out our bi-weekly meeting podcast. If you'd like to stay up to date on all of the latest news for the OWASP Top 10 for large language model applications, please click subscribe. And of course, we'd appreciate it if you'd share with a friend to grow our community. We'll see you in 2 weeks.